Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Radical Democracy Show. I'm your host, Kamali Rose, joining you here on December 31st, 2020, closing out the year here. Hope probably going to do a show later tonight, to truly close out the year, crossing into the new year. But for now, just wanted to cover one topic in particular, and that's the fact that the Senate Democrats have now completely folded on the $2,000 stimulus checks. We covered some of this yesterday when McConnell and the Senate Republicans were essentially the ones that were standing in the way, but they still continue to hold on strong on that position. But now they have been joined essentially by the Senate Democrats, who were unwilling to take, all measures available to them and to use all strategies available to them in order to secure these $2,000 checks. So at this stage, this is it. There is now nothing standing in the way of Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans. They will apparently get what they want here, and what it seems like the Democrats honestly wanted themselves as well, which is to leave the people, American people, with $600 stimulus checks and nothing more. And so what I'd like to do is just show you a clip of this. Is from a segment on The Hill's Rising with Crystal Ball, and she has on as a guest host Rachel Bovard, who is a right winger. And the first clip that we're going to watch is going to actually be a bit of Bernie Sanders on the floor giving a speech on the floor of the Senate, and then some of the background and reaction from Crystal Ball. So let's take a look at this clip, and then we will come back and we'll discuss. All right.
In the House, over 2/3 of the members of that body, including 44 Republicans, voted to say that at this time of economic desperation, working families deserve help and they deserve a $2,000 check. And as Senator Schumer just indicated, we have a very unlikely ally in President Trump. Nobody here has disagreed with Trump more times than I have. And yet here is what the leader of the Republican Party says. He says $2,000 ASAP.
Unfortunately, that's all Trump really did, though, was send out these tweets. And so Bernie threatened to hold up the NDAA, which he followed through on. And this comes from David Sirota's reporting. I just want to read this directly so people understand Democrats' complicity in what I think you aptly dubbed, Rachel, failure theater. So Sanders forced McConnell to ask the Senate to pass a formal motion to proceed on the defense bill that would let Republicans move forward on the Pentagon priority without a vote on the $2,000 checks. So that motion that Bernie forced created the moment when Democrats could have stood their ground and cornered the GOP leader. Instead, as Republicans saber-rattled about the need to pass the defense bill, 41 Democrats obediently voted alongside McConnell, allowing him to move the defense bill forward without a vote on the checks. That included, by the way, yes votes from Chuck Schumer and the one and only Kamala Harris, who was the lead sponsor on a bill to give Americans monthly $2,000 checks during the pandemic and has been wholly silent during this entire debate. One day before her vote to help McConnell, she had called on the Republican leader to hold a vote on her legislation, but then she meekly goes along with him when it actually counts. This is what's really pathetic. Only 6 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus actually mustered the courage to vote against McConnell's maneuver alongside Sanders. You had Warren, Chris Van Hollen, Jeff Merkley, Ed Markey, and Ron Wyden. So the Democrats in the end didn't really care, except for these few 6 people, didn't really care about getting checks to people. They cared about winning the rhetorical argument. They got that. They were afraid, I think, of being painted as anti-military or anti-troops. And so they just roll right over, give McConnell exactly what he wanted. And there you go, Rachel.
All right. So that was Crystal Ball on Rising, just breaking down the sort of background and the details of this move by the Senate Democrats essentially. What Bernie did was that he went out there. He said, "Listen, I will not vote in favor of this National Defense Authorization Act, which is the annual, the military budget. It's a about $750 billion package." And Trump had vetoed that package, Trump citing some little tiny bits of foreign aid in the annual budget. And so Trump had originally vetoed that National Defense Authorization Act. Then in order to override the veto, they had to go to a vote in the Senate where they would have to get at least a 2/3 majority to override Trump's veto. And so in that vote, unfortunately, they were absolutely able to get the veto override, meaning that that Defense Authorization Act has been now, it will go through and it will become legislation. So they will, while they've denied people a vote, they're saying they won't even hold a vote. All that Bernie was calling for in saying, "Listen, I'm not going to vote for the NDA until McConnell promises me that ensures that we'll get a vote on an up or down vote on the $2,000 stimulus check." So Bernie's saying, "Listen, you give us a vote for the $2,000 stimulus checks." It's not saying you give us the $2,000 stimulus checks, right? He's saying we want to hold a vote on it, right? Okay, so just let's hold a vote on that on a single issue bill, and and get people on the record one way or the other. In what Bernie needed was the backing of the Democratic Party in that situation to say, okay, well, if all of this, if the Senate Democrats would all combine together and would say, all right, we will withhold our vote for this NDA or vote no on this NDAA until we get a vote on the $2,000 stimulus checks, then if that was an issue that they actually cared about, and if their real concern was actually ensuring that people get these $2,000 checks, well, you have to use the leverage available to you. They, of course, want to hide behind some sort of, it's anti-troops or something if you don't support this National Defense Authorization Act. It absolutely isn't. You would only, it would be, you put the ball in the Republicans' court at that point to say, hey, are you so against providing help to the rest of Americans that you would hold up both the relief to the rest of the Americans, the $2,000 checks, and this financial fund in this funding for the so-called the military. Of course, the bulk of that is spent on weapons contractors for the military, not the actual members of the military, not the actual troops themselves. The vast majority of that is actually going to just weapons manufacturers is all. And so, but they do it under the guise of supporting the troops, and the Democrats are weak. And honestly, this is something that they support. Both parties support the, military industrial complex. And this is absolutely a bill that benefits them. So this was sadly, sort of a final measure. And we talked about it when we covered this McConnell blocking the stimulus initially. We covered it and talked about this, and talked about Bernie Sanders doing what he could here. And sadly, he was only joined by 5 other Senate Democrats: Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, Chris Van Hollen, Jeff Merkley, and Ron Wyden. So those were the only Democrats in the Senate. Only 6 total were willing to vote against the military funding, and in trying to do so in exchange for the the vote on the $2,000 checks. And it kind of proves something. This proves that the Senate Democrats, while they were willing to put on a bit of political theater and act as if they really supported these $2,000 checks. When push came to shove, they weren't really willing to sacrifice anything to use their leverage, use what little leverage they have, the only leverage they have. Let's be real here. They weren't willing to use the only leverage they have to actually, demand a vote on this. And so I want to show a quick clip, just something that Rachel Bovard said. And this is, again, a right winger. She's filling in for Saagar Enjeti on Rising here. And I just want to point out something she said because, and before I do that, let me just say something else that Crystal noted here is that Chuck Schumer and Kamala Harris, in addition to, 39 other Senate Democrats, voted in favor of the National Defense Authorization Act, meaning they took away the only piece of leverage that Democrats had in order to demand the $2,000 checks, meaning $600 checks is all the American people are getting. And Chuck Schumer and Kamala Harris helped that, right? They helped that along. So as much as Chuck Schumer went out and, sat there, doing platitudes, acting as if he, would fight for the $2,000 checks, really, he only said he supported them, but was unwilling to fight for them. And this is the difference of just saying you support something and fighting for something. There's a difference between those two things. So, I want to sort of relate this to something else that's going on right now and another bit of leverage that we hold right now for progressives and for the left wing. The other little bit of leverage that we hold right now is on this other sort of force the vote movement in the House as well, to try to force a vote on Medicare for all. And Rachel Bovard in this segment, she said something in regard to the Senate vote, but I thought that it was really applicable to both of these situations and really just kind of highlights an issue and shows where the left is still, not recognizing a certain power that it has and not in showing a certain unwillingness to actually use the little bit of power that it does have, the sort of electoral left. So let me show you a clip of Rachel Bovard here talking about, a little bit of that. And then we'll come back and we'll chat some more. All right. So give me 1 second. Let me just pull this up. Pull up Rachel Bovard here. I thought this was a very important point that she makes here. So.
No, I think it goes to the broader point of the fact that our legislative process is completely broken. Right? We are talking about an up or down vote on one issue. And this is what a representative self-government does. It's supposed to vote on issues that matter.
One issue with 80% support, by the way.
Right. We can't even do that. And it goes to the problem that we have routinely now every single year, is why we get to these massive bloated bills at the end of the year. Nobody knows what's in them because there's been no process. A vote doesn't mean something is going to pass. A vote just means people have to go on the record. And voting, again, is the only accountability, the only clarity we have in the legislative process. We should be doing it every week. We should be doing it every day. And, I think, and I said this yesterday, I really do think McConnell is working against his own interest here, because we know McConnell is a political creature first and foremost. He is not ideological about any issue that I can tell besides war and campaign finance. Other than that, he is completely driven by politics. You have an issue that in Georgia polls extremely well, and yet McConnell will not even put it on the floor. And again, putting on the floor doesn't guarantee passage. It just means taking a position. Put it on the floor, defeat it, move past it if that's what you want. But have that process. That's why we have a self-government. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless.
All right. So there's, Rachel Bovard making a really important point about the fact that these, this is what a representative self-government is supposed to do. This is what their jobs are, and they're not doing their jobs here, right? So they're supposed to vote on things, right? That's their entire purpose. That's all that they can actually do, is to advance legislation. That's the entirety of their jobs, essentially. Now, of course, there's a lot of it that is about the research on the policy and all that sort of stuff, but that's all done by staffers. These legislators are not the ones poring over pages of, research and legislation and writing up these amendments and writing these bills. No, they have a whole bunch of staffers that do that work. Their job is to go in there and to vote on these measures and to to show that they're representing their people. That's the only way that we get them on record, actually telling us whether or not they're doing their jobs, which their job is supposed to be representative of the people, right? Representative of their constituency. And so they're not, they're not even willing to hold a vote on a simple issue. Are we going to give people $600 checks or $2,000 checks? In Rachel Bovard, she's a right winger. She's making the argument that, listen, let's hold the vote and then, in her eyes, hopefully defeat it, because she doesn't believe in doing that sort of spending on people. But she's still saying, at the very least, these people should be holding the vote. That's the very least that we should be asking of them. And they're completely skirting their duty by not doing at the very least that, right? And so I think that this is just indicative of the fact that both parties are in part responsible for the condition that the masses of people find themselves in today, and that's people not being able to make rent, eviction moratoriums coming due. This one, there was one expiring on December 31st. Today, one would have expired. With this stimulus package having been signed, it is now pushed back till January 31st. But all the while, landlords are finding loopholes to kick people out of their homes, and in the middle of a pandemic. And they've done studies on this that have shown that in the places that landlords have been able to evict people, because they've been able to evict people all throughout this entire pandemic, in the places where there were higher evictions, there were higher rates of death from COVID-19. And that's just kind of obvious, right? It should be really obvious of why something like that would happen. It's because you put people out onto the streets and they can't shelter in place. It's much harder to find, clean, safe areas to sleep that are, isolated areas, as well as do routine hand washing. So you just don't have access to these things if you're homeless. And so it's critical. It's a public health issue when we have homelessness existing in any way, shape, or form during a pandemic. And we shouldn't be, those are things that we have to recognize a sort of systemic problem there, and make sure that we are acknowledging the suffering of those people and realize that these people need help. And for many people, $600 versus $2,000 for, millions of people is going to be the difference of maybe just being able to hold on to your home for one more month. It doesn't go far enough. And this should be, people should be getting $2,000 monthly stimulus checks just through at least the entirety of this pandemic, but really until we can solve the rest of society's problems, in a more targeted way, building up more housing, more affordable housing, things like that. But we have more empty units of housing in this country than we have homeless people. And so the issue isn't just, the amount of housing available. It's the type of housing, of course. And it's shameful that in the midst of a pandemic, you have both Democrats and Republicans unwilling to provide the necessary, relief to people that are in need, and to, be sitting there bickering over $1,400 for the last, it's now been over 9 months since the last stimulus relief package, and we're seriously bickering over just $1,400 as if either of these things are enough, right? 600 wasn't enough. 2,000 isn't enough. And, 2,000 isn't even enough. Right. So the fact that we're sitting there just fighting just for that, it's really just crumbs at this point. And it's going to be woefully insufficient, even if it were $2,000. The sad, pathetic thing is that we couldn't even get $2,000 out of a Congress that we pay, I think we pay $16,000 a month to these politicians. That's their salary, $175,000 a year. Mitch McConnell, these senators, every member in the House, every member of Congress right now is being paid $175,000 a year in order to turn around and to deny Americans even a measly, $1,400 extra. They're denying people a $2,000 check when they're getting paid, nearly $4,000 a week. $4,000 a week. Are you kidding me? And we pay these people $4,000 a week so that they can deny us $2,000 a month. That's disgusting. And we should it's a gross system we have set up. And I think that what Rachel Bovar was talking about there, it goes to the point of not just this Senate vote, because she's saying, listen, the all you can do is ask people to vote on these issues and vote on issues that matter, right? Like, that's your job. You should be voting on the issues that matter. There's another issue that matters to a lot of people. Again, in the middle of a pandemic, people have their health care attached to their employer. You become unemployed, which I have, which many millions of other Americans have in this time. You all of a sudden, you don't have health care, and you don't have health insurance anymore. And so that's another serious issue. And we have a bunch of Democrats in the House that are even unwilling to bring up a vote. We have control of the House. It's not Mitch McConnell in the House, it's Nancy Pelosi. And even in a House that's controlled by Democrats, you got the Democrats turning around saying, oh, we can't vote on this issue because we don't want to make the centrist Democrats look bad. Like, why would we not want to do that? And for the Democrats in the House that aren't pushing for it, like trying to play this like backroom deal stuff, it's just a shame to see, because honestly, it's the very least that we should be asking of these people is to vote on these issues. And we can't even get that. So please, if you're just joining us and you haven't done so already, hit the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Follow us if you're on Twitch. Shout out to everyone that's watching, chatting. I see you, Corey, Oshi Fancy, Antifa is absolute in this one. I see all of y'all. Thank you. And shout out to everyone, all of y'all for jumping in here and chatting and joining us today. I want to play one other clip here real quick. This one is actually it's another clip from this segment on Rising, but this is Newt Gingrich. They're gonna play a clip from Newt Gingrich, an appearance that he made on Fox News. And I mean, most people, I think, who Newt Gingrich is. This is a Bush Republican, Newt Gingrich here, and staunch right winger. And just listen to what Newt Gingrich's take on holding this floor vote is. He has some advice for Mitch McConnell. So let me show you this little clip of Newt Gingrich just talking about what he thinks some of the consequences of this could be. Of course, in relation to the Georgia Senate runoff elections that are happening on January 5th. So take a quick listen to this clip of Newt Gingrich on Fox News, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss.
I really am very worried that if he plays a clever parliamentary game, it may look good inside the Senate, but it could cost us 2 Senate seats and control of the Senate. So I would beg him to bring up the $2,000 payment as a freestanding, independent vote, and I'll have people like Senator Loeffler and Senator Perdue able to come back and vote for it, take it off the table as an issue. Because frankly, if Warnock and Ossoff can be in favor of the $2,000 unit and can attack Mitch McConnell for the next 6 days, I think it's very hard at that point to win the race.
I don't know if I'd be.
All right. So that's Newt Gingrich, a right winger, saying, listen, this is what he fears it could be the result of something like this, is that this could actually play out poorly because he's not giving Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, who are both running their incumbents in the Georgia runoff elections, Loeffler versus Warnock in the special election, Perdue versus Jon Ossoff in the regular election. And but those are both runoffs happening again on January 5th. So Newt Gingrich here is saying that, listen, this looks like something that could end up hurting Republicans in the Senate runoff races. Why? Because he believes that David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, as they have said that they would have done, would have voted in favor of the $2,000 checks. Unfortunately, even with them voting in favor, more Republicans would have voted against it, and they wouldn't have gotten the relief. Of course, that would have been bad for Republicans, and it is yet another reason why, if Democrats were really serious about taking power in the Senate, they would have done everything to block this. And the Senate Democrats would have done everything to block this if that's what they really cared about, right? Is they would have, if they all say that they're in support of the $2,000 checks, they would all come out and vote in favor of the $2,000 checks. Get Republicans on the record in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of an economic crisis, saying that they don't believe that, American people deserve, working families and poor and working families deserve a $2,000 one-time payment. you know, that's too much to give to people somehow, and you know, let it do the damage that it's going to do to them. But they are just, of course, it's, you know, they're pro-war, you know, Democrats. They are, you know, hawkish. They are not anti-war. They are totally in the, you know, just beholden to the military industrial complex. And this was a essentially no-brainer for the Senate, you know, Democrats and Republicans, because they are all beholden to the military industrial complex and are happy to, you know, those sorts of votes that you never have to be concerned. The military will always get their money. You know, and not the military, you know, these so-called, you know, the weapons contractors, right? Boeing, Raytheon, you know, Lockheed Martin, like all these military industrial complex, you know, what is it? General Dynamics Corporation, like, you know, these, you know, weapons contractors are the ones getting the bulk of that money in that National Defense Authorization Act. It's really National Offense Authorization Act, really. And so, yeah, that's what it is. And even a Republican sort of sees the problems that it could play out. And honestly, I think that could be, even though I don't think that Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are going to be some progressives that come in, the benefit that I see to that on the left is that if this does have the effect of enabling those Democrats to win those runoff elections, which I don't think is a guarantee, because the Democrats always find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And so even with these layups given to them, they'll still find a way to lose these runoff elections. And so it's not just a you know, a done deal or anything like that, but it does, I think, increase their chances of winning these runoff elections, because you got, you know, Republicans essentially looking like they're the ones that are blocking these $2,000 checks in the end, even though it was a bipartisan effort. Essentially, the Democrats still have their talking point that they got, you know, yesterday, essentially with Schumer, and coming out on the record and acting as if they did support the $2,000 stimulus checks, and as if it was just the Republicans standing in the way. I just want to do this segment to make sure that we highlight that it's not just the Republicans standing in the way of providing, you know, help to suffering people right now. It's the Democrats too. And we have to fight. It's establishment Democrats. And we need people that are willing to go into Congress and fight against the establishment. And sadly, I don't see that happening, you know, out of even the new members, you know, the members of the squad. I'm just not seeing enough of that fight in the recognition that it's not just, you know, establishment Republicans or, you know, House, you know, congressional Republicans that we have to fight against, but it's also establishment, you know, corporate Democrats as well. And understanding that fight and playing and letting that fight play out, and using our power, using our leverage when we have it, because this leverage, it only comes along, you know, a few times in a lifetime, really, you know, and it's just like we have the leverage right now. And I would love to see House Democrats on January 3rd, you know, as my birthday, as a birthday gift to me, please do me a favor, House Democrats, and for my birthday, please make my birthday wish come true, and, you know, forced a vote on Medicare for all. I wish you would force not just a vote on Medicare for all, withhold your vote for Nancy Pelosi unless she agrees to not just a floor vote for Medicare for all, but also a House resolution to be passed, or to be taken up for a House resolution that would, you know, demand that Joe Biden use his executive authority to enact the provision in the ACA that would allow him to expand Medicare in regions that are undergoing a public health crisis, which is every area of the United States during this pandemic. Essentially, you know, it's a loophole that would allow a president to enact Medicare for all without having to wait for, you know, without having to pass it through Congress. So Joe Biden has the power to give us Medicare for all. He's not going to give it to us without us, fighting him on it in the way that the leverage, the last little bit of leverage that we have for the foreseeable future is the vote, is Nancy Pelosi's speakership. So I hope it's used wisely. There was a town hall on the Force the Vote effort that was held yesterday. I hope to cover some of at least Cornel West's appearance there. So I'll be doing another segment today, hopefully covering that. Again, if you haven't done so already, please hit the like button down below, hit the subscribe button, and share this out as well. I'm just going to take a few comments before we take off. Trying to keep these segments shorter, so we'll see. Just saying what's up to Oshi Fancy. Oshi Fancy says, "Yay, I made it. Love to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us on Twitch. Really appreciate that. Always appreciate having you here. So thank you so much for that." Corey Saylor says, "I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. Bernie is still out there blaming Republicans as if Dems were complicit in screwing him and us again." And I think just to correct that a little bit, I think I might be. I think what Corey was saying is Bernie is still out there blaming Republicans as if Dems weren't complicit in screwing him and us again. Yeah. So Bernie, still out there just acting as if it's the Republicans only, when really the Senate Democrats just completely turned their back on him and were unwilling to use the little bit of leverage that they had to just simply hold up the National Defense Authorization Act, which was what Trump already has done, by vetoing it. And we're unwilling to do that because they're just so beholden to the military industrial complex. Instead, they're happy to fund that back to the tune of $740 billion. But, asking for essentially about $400 to $450 billion more for, struggling Americans is too much to ask. It's just too much to ask. Mark McKeever says, "All of the suffering in 2020 will compound in 2021. The package is only 50% new money. Let's not forget that they're going to fuck the masses even more when our taxes go up next 5 years, starting 2021. Yeah, they'll find a way to put the burden back onto, working class people. They will always do whatever they can to shift the burden onto working class people. As long as we allow a working class and a ruling class to exist, as long as we have the employer class and the employee class, they will always find a way to shift the burden. The employer class will always find a way to shift the burden onto the employee class, and they will bear the brunt of this, as they have been throughout the entire pandemic. Just look who's the essential workers that have been dying at alarming rates, and the workers, former workers that, were kicked out of their jobs, kicked off of their health insurance in the middle of a pandemic, and are just trying to make ends meet. And not to mention all the people that were already homeless, poor, struggling already. We were in a recession before the pandemic began. And so nothing has changed. I think that there's going to be a lot of people sort of celebrating the end of 2020 because, 2020 was such a terrible year. And of course, it was a terrible year. Sadly, I just don't think that 2021 is going to, be far better, unfortunately, because we still have all of these systemic problems, and nothing is systemically changing. So if you really believe that these are system problems and the system doesn't change, then you have to believe that the problems will continue. And so I think whether we had Donald Trump or not, we were going to have a terrible, response to this pandemic. Because we were not prepared. We were ill-equipped. We didn't have the masks. We didn't have the ventilators. We didn't have the manufacturing here in the United States to spin those processes up. And we weren't stockpiling those, protective equipment. We weren't doing the testing on coronaviruses, even though we knew that coronaviruses existed and that they were a major threat to, the masses of people. It wasn't profitable for private corporations to do so, and we didn't have the political will in our government to do so. And what we're left with is an unprepared country in the middle of in the midst of an economic recession that was happening before we knew about coronavirus. The recession had already begun. And that was, officially it began in February. We didn't start lockdowns until March. And so that's that. And, sadly, this is what we've come to expect of our Congress. And I don't expect anything to change here. So what we're getting is $600 checks to the mass of people. $2,000 checks are gone. That's just not happening anymore. And we have not only Republicans to blame for it, but Democrats as well, who were unwilling to use the little bit of leverage that they had to actually fight for, struggling Americans. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Again, if you haven't done so already, just hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, and share this out on social media. Really appreciate you joining us. And we will be back with some more live segments later on in the day. So hope we see you for those as well. All right. Peace.